Pauline, we'll get to these overzealous fines in a second, but first up, would you support the increase of the GST to 15% to pay back this massive fiscal bill that we've been landed with to try and get us out of this crisis?
No, I wouldn't. Not at all, Peter. The GST, the first time it was introduced into the country by John Howard, it has to be in agreement with all the states and the federal to increase the GST. The states are, it's a big loss to the states, and I understand that. If you increase the GST, the federal doesn't get the funds from it. All the money goes back to the states. So how is the federal government going to recoup what's cost them for the coronavirus? If you put up the GST to 15%, everything that you buy, everything that you've done, your services, your goods that you buy, you're going to be paying another half the amount again in GST. Your electricity bills, your water, your rates, everything. So you're paying an extra more in GST. The Australian people cannot pay anymore. You know, they're taxed to the hilt. When it was first brought in, the states were supposed to get rid of a lot of other taxes, but they never did. I don't trust the governments at all. What I'd like to see, I spoke to the government about the gas off the Northwest Shelf. We export about $54 billion worth of gas to countries, Japan is one of them, and they actually pay in total around about $400 million in taxes. That's all they pay. The multinationals in Australia have registered their companies in overseas countries, a lot of them tax havens, so they don't pay taxes here. So compare the multinationals to Australian companies and businesses. They pay little or no tax whatsoever. So before I see the Australian people taxed with GST, I've been crying out for this for the last 24 years. Tax the multinationals, but the governments are reluctant to do it, both the Liberal, the Nationals and the Labor parties.
Pauline, let's have a fair income discussion about some of the things that have gone on over Easter with the cops and the way that they've introduced these $1,300 fines. Now, just have a listen to this. 4 blokes were today fined $1,300 each for having a pizza in their car. You had a poor bloke who went on a Tinder date. He went from Cairns up to Mossman, and he was fined $1,300. Very expensive date. I just hope that it was worth it. You had people fined $1,300 for dumping rubbish at tips here in Brisbane, but the tips were open. I mean, if they'd closed the tips, fair enough, but they had and apparently they've been waived, I heard that. You've had people fined for fishing,
correct,
people fined for camping, people fined for driving around. Now, there's evidence that we're flattening the curve, and as I said in my intro, Pauline, we need to be rewarded for good behaviour. I mean, most people are doing the right thing. This is a little bit over the top, isn't it?
It's way over the top, Peter, and I've said that before. It is way over the top. And I've watched the footage where people are sitting in a park, you know, just 2 people on the grass. What are they doing? They're inflicting probably coronavirus on anyone else. They're not. People can't even walk the beaches. It's ridiculous. People should be out in the sunshine. They should be getting the exercise. If you lock people up constantly in their homes, they can't go anywhere or do anything. This is going to cause more problems to our society. If we can actually then have the shops open, if the shops are open, we can actually go to the shops. What is wrong with people going to the beach, going to the park, doing some camping, going fishing? For people in Queensland, 2 people on a boat, that you can't go fishing, or only if you're going to go out to catch food. You know, you can't have a leisure, just go and get in your boat, get away from it all. I think it's ridiculous, and they need to wake up to themselves, because there will be a backlash. People have been fantastic. They are very aware of this, especially when we see the number of deaths that is happening in other countries around the world. People are concerned, they're frightened, and they're taking those precautions. But for the government to do this, I think it's really a dictatorship, the way it's going now. I just think it's a bit over the top. And you're right in your comments, you know. People need to relax a little bit, and I like to see the footy come back. You don't have to have the stands full of people. Let's televise it, But surely these players are fit and they should be just watched afterwards instead of locked down. I think it's ridiculous. Bring back the footy.
What about easing some of these restrictions? I mean, there's calls to trial situations where some cafes would open, some restaurants would open. I mean, obviously it has to be staged. And Pauline, I'm in no way suggesting that we endanger people's lives. That's not the idea here. But people are going stir crazy. People need to have incentives to get out and get some sort of normality back into their lives. I mean, talking about easing restrictions, what would be a good first starting point from your perspective?
Right, some of these restaurants that you have, if you have social distancing in the restaurants, there's no reason why people can't go there. And as long as there is an undertaking by the management that all steps are taken to actually make sure that everything is wiped down and it's quite, sterile after someone has eaten there. The staff will actually, wear the protective clothing or wear the gloves or wear the masks if they want to. It's up to them. It's choice if people want to do. I don't wear a mask when I go out and it's people's choice. But I think you've got to start relaxing and let people go to some of the cafes, restaurants, and especially in these small country towns, you've got no coronavirus there. The people rely on going there and having a beer, The locals need it. The farmers need to be able to go there and that social interaction. It's everything to them. I think by shutting everything down, and especially if they think for another 6 months, as I said, Peter, until they find a vaccine for this, which is, we're looking at a year and a half, I reckon a year and a half, they've got to start relaxing it. And we are on the downward swing. There's 61 deaths. It's a shame we've had that many. But I think the fact is that we've got to start loosening the reins a little bit.
Pauline, let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that's the Chinese. Would you impose tariffs? And in my column in the Courier Mail today, I spoke about how this should forever change the way in which Australians do business, and that is that we need to be more innovative, we need to be more creative. We've had situations here in Queensland where people who were basically putting together those masks for snorers, they're now putting together masks. We've had 888, the manufacturing company, it's come up with ventilators. It used to make V8s. These are all the innovations that are happening. Where was this 20 years ago when the Chinese were flooding our market with their products?
That was the free trade agreements, and I've been a protectionist for Australian businesses and industries and manufacturing all my political life, Peter, and this is what I've been fighting for. You can't compete with countries that bring in cheap products and they actually pay wages of only a few dollars a day. We can't maintain our standard of living and way of life if we actually allow these imports to come in, not only with product but also with food that we are bringing in from other countries, which has destroyed a lot of our farming sector. That's where we need to be productive in Australia. Over the years, and especially now, going to the science research that's brought to Parliament, and we have so many smart people in Australia that the government never backs, and we lose those people. They actually are taken up by other countries around the world. We have invented so many things in Australia. I'm just amazed what we have invented, and yet the government has let them slip through our fingers. Now's the opportunity for the government to get behind these very smart Australians, keep them here, and with their inventions, start up with the industries and manufacturing, put tariffs back on imports into Australia so it protects our own product here. Because as I said, if we want to maintain our standard of living and way of life, you actually have to charge these countries to send their product out here, put a tariff on it. That is a tax that goes into the Australian coffers, will help us get over this cost of the coronavirus. There's so many things we can do. We need to start the farming sector. We've got so much valuable land out there, agricultural land, that, the farming sector, they're walking away from it. I feel for these people. They love the land. They want to pass it on to future generations, but they're given no help or assistance by the governments. Open up the Bradfield scheme. Give us the water that we need to start up the production. A lot of countries are shutting down now. They're not producing the food themselves. We should be doing that now. Get on the back foot and start, start producing the food that we need and export it to the rest of the world.
Pauline, before we go, I'm just interested in your thoughts on another 2 deaths from the Ruby Princess. There's now class actions being talked about with lawyers for those who are on board. I mean, this has turned into an absolute nightmare. Now, there are repercussions. We know that there's a criminal investigation now been ordered by Mick Fuller, the head of New South Wales Police. I know we spoke about this last week, but it still remains a massive issue. How the bloody hell did this happen?
It was. I don't think enough. They knew there was illnesses on the ship before it actually docked, and the New South Wales Health Department has to take responsibility for this and the federal government, because the biosecurity wasn't put in place to ensure that it was safe for those passengers to get off. So I think full responsibility here. I think that it was the New South Wales Health Minister that should have taken control of the situation and told the Health Department what he believed should have been done. You see, Peter, the trouble with a lot of politicians, and I was told this years and years ago by a former minister of the Bajelki government. He said, "The bureaucrats gave me the wrong information. I delivered that wrong information, which cost me my job." And this what happens is a lot of the ministers, instead of doing the research and know what they're doing, they take the advice from the bureaucrats. They don't, if they want to get rid of you, they'll give you the wrong information. So if you're going to be a good minister in a position, know the background to something. Do the research, do the work yourself. Don't trust anyone else, especially when your job's on the line, and especially in this case, people's lives were on the line. So to Brad Hazzard, my suggestion is you should resign, because you never did your job properly. And when I hear from the background that he didn't know what was going on, well, then you're at fault. If you allowed the bureaucrats in New South Wales Health Department to tell you what to do, when you should have researched it and knew what you were doing first and foremost. So I think that he needs to answer the people.
All right, Pauline Hanson, great to see you tonight on Sky News Across Australia. Thanks for joining us.